Dubrovnik, the pearl of the Adriatic. Stop thinking about history as just kings and battles. This is the story of intellect triumphing over brute force. This is Dubrovnik, the tiny republic of Ragusa, which for 5 centuries purchased its freedom by skillfully navigating the deadly power struggle between the Ottoman Empire and Venice. Our channel explores how this magnificent pearl of the Adriatic, a city that abolished the slave trade and built an economic empire on trade contracts, endured and rebuilt after every catastrophe, from the devastating 1667 earthquake to the modern siege of 1991. Join us as we reveal the hidden genius inside these ancient stone walls, proving that true sovereignty is defended not just by arms, but by an unwavering commitment to the ideal of libertas. Part 1. The Birth of Liberty. There are places on Earth built not just by human hands, but by the sheer, unyielding will to survive. This is Dubrovnik, a city whose story is carved into its limestone, written in its laws, and declared in its centuries-old motto, Non bene pro toto libertas venditur oro. That means, freedom should not be sold for all the gold in the world. For 5 centuries, this city-state, known as the Republic of Ragusa, held its ground. Surrounded by empires, Venice to the sea, the Ottomans to the land, it outwitted them all, becoming the tiny, wealthy pearl of the Adriatic. But what does it take to forge a republic out of a fortress? A republic where the arts flourished, the slave trade was abolished centuries ahead of its time, and the price of liberty was paid in shrewd diplomacy, not blood. The ancient foundation. The story begins in the 7th century, not with conquest, but with retreat. Roman refugees, fleeing the Slav and Avar incursions that destroyed the nearby town of Epidaurus, modern Cavtat, found refuge on a tiny, rocky island known as Laos, meaning rock. Across a marshy channel, a second settlement of Slavs took root at the foot of Mount Sur, naming their village Dubrava, meaning oak forest. 2 distinct cultures, 2 worlds, separated by a thin strip of sea. In the 11th century, a great strategic decision was made. The channel was filled in with earth and stone. Laos and Dubrava became one, physically united into a single, fortified city. The resulting flat, central thoroughfare, the Plaka, or the Straton as it is known today, lies precisely where the sea once flowed, symbolically uniting the Latin and Slavic hearts of the emerging city. The unification necessitated protection. Facing constant threats, particularly from Saracens and the powerful Venetian Republic, the inhabitants began the colossal undertaking of building the city walls. The walls were not built in a decade, but over centuries, a continuous act of civic investment that would define the city's future. The great sea walls and towering bastions, like the magnificent Minsta Tower and Fort Lavrjenik, became the ultimate expression of the Ragusan will. If you want to be free, you must build your own defense. The rise of a republic. As its defenses grew, so did its ambitions. By the 13th century, Dubrovnik had become an important Mediterranean sea power. It was a trading center uniquely positioned at the gateway between the Western European markets and the vast resources of the Balkans. Its independence was hard-won. The city was briefly under the protection, or often the domination, of Venice. But the soul of the city was always fixed on self-rule. In 1358, following the Treaty of Zadar, the city successfully liberated itself from Venetian suzerainty and officially established the Republic of Ragusa. This was the start of the Golden Era, where diplomacy and trade became the true weapons. The Rector's Palace, standing at the heart of the city, became the seat of a carefully constrained aristocratic government. The leaders understood that their greatest strength was not military, but systemic stability. Dr. Perek. The Straton is the spine of Dubrovnik. Look at the architecture. It is a harmonious, almost identical style. This is no accident. After the devastating earthquake of 1667, the Republic passed laws demanding uniformity. It wasn't about aesthetics, it was a visible declaration of stability and collective will. A uniform city was a strong city. The people of Ragusa were preparing to embark on an extraordinary journey, building an empire not of land, but of commerce and contracts, all protected by the most formidable stone shell in the Adriatic. They were building a republic that would prioritize collective interest over private ambition, a society determined to pay any price except the one that would cost them their freedom. Part 2. The Golden Age of Ragusa. By the mid-14th century, after centuries of paying tribute and submitting to the occasional rule of others, the tiny settlement on the Dalmatian coast achieved its true destiny. In 1358, the Treaty of Zadar saw the rising Republic of Ragusa break free from the powerful, often oppressive grip of Venice. The Republic was born, and its golden age was about to begin. It would last for over 400 years. Ragusa was an aristocratic republic, a rigid but functional political machine. The government was concentrated in the hands of the nobility, who governed through three main bodies: the Great Council, the Small Council, and the Senate. At the head was the rector, the head of state, but his power was strictly limited. His one-month term, and the rule that he could not be re-elected for 2 years, ensured that no single individual or family could establish a dictatorship. This constitutional discipline was the internal engine of their success. It was a government that prioritized collective interest over private ambition. Obliti privatorum, publica curate, forget private affairs, take care of public ones, was their guiding principle. But the true genius of Ragusa lay not in its domestic politics, but in its foreign policy. The Republic was an island of Christian freedom, wedged between the ambitions of the Catholic powers of Europe and the vast Ottoman Empire. They didn't fight, they negotiated, they became the ultimate middlemen. Professor Novosel. The Ragusans mastered the concept of soft power before the term even existed. They understood that their survival depended on their perceived utility. To the Ottomans, they were a valuable Christian trading post, a financial conduit, and a reliable source of European goods. To the West, they were a buffer and a crucial diplomatic link. Their annual tribute to the Sultan was essentially an insurance premium, a small price for guaranteed commercial protection across a massive empire. This diplomatic leverage allowed them to flourish as a maritime mercantile power. Ragusan ships sailed every route, from the Levant to the Atlantic, trading salt, silver, timber, and cloth. Their merchant fleet, with 180 to 200 large ships in the 16th century, rivaled the major naval powers of the time. The very word, argosy, a large merchant ship, is believed to be a corruption of Ragusa. They were a global brand. The Republic's wealth fostered an extraordinary cultural and moral vision. In 1418, decades before the major powers of Europe, the Republic of Ragusa abolished the slave trade. This was not merely a moral statement, it was an economic one. It protected the integrity of its maritime labor force and ensured its status as a sophisticated, forward-thinking nation in a volatile world. Art, literature, and science blossomed in this environment of stability and wealth. The city earned the moniker, the South Slav Athens. Literary giants like Marin Djic and Ivan Gundulic wrote in the Croatian language, weaving Ragusan themes into timeless Renaissance and Baroque poetry and drama, ensuring that culture was as vital a defense as the city's stone walls. Public infrastructure reflected this societal commitment. The city's complex, working aqueduct system, designed to bring fresh water from the mountains, fed the magnificent Onofrio's fountains, one large, one small, providing water security and symbolizing the Republic's commitment to public health. The Franciscan monastery housed one of the oldest functioning pharmacies in Europe, dating back to 1317, a testament to Ragusan foresight in medicine and community care. Within the Sponza Palace, which served as the customs house and mint, the state archives were meticulously kept. These documents, some dating back over 8 centuries, chart every trade agreement, every diplomatic maneuver, and every law passed by the Great Council. They are the true treasure of Ragusa, the blueprint of a republic that valued paper and ink as highly as it valued its fortifications. The city was a masterpiece of civic planning, a perfect late medieval urban system. Yet, the very success of the republic was a target. The rivalry with Venice was constant, a cold war fought with tariffs and counter-tariffs. But the greatest threat to this city of stone would ultimately come not from the sea, but from the earth itself. Part 3. Trial by fire and stone. The earth trembles. The people of Ragusa were used to the threats of man, but the fury of nature was a force no diplomatic treaty could placate. At 8 a.m. on the morning of April 6, 1667, the earth groaned. A catastrophic earthquake, one of the most destructive to ever hit the Mediterranean, ripped through the city. The force was immense. It brought down mountains, triggered a tsunami, and shattered the heart of Ragusa. Up to 5,000 people, a significant portion of the city's population, including many of the leading patrician families, were killed. Churches, palaces, and monasteries built in the high Renaissance style collapsed into piles of rubble. The great Romanesque cathedral, housing the relics of the city's patron, Saint Blaise, was instantly destroyed. The economic, political, and cultural core of the Republic lay buried. Dr. Marco Peric. The 1667 earthquake was more than a natural disaster, it was an existential crisis. The noble class, which ran the aristocratic republic, was decimated. The loss of wealth and infrastructure was crippling. This was the moment the Republic almost disappeared, not under a foreign flag, but under its own ruins. Yet, the spirit of Libertas, the idea of the Republic, proved tougher than the stone. Reconstruction began immediately. The Senate, depleted but resolute, focused on recovery with the same single-minded purpose they had applied to trade. The reconstruction gave the city its modern, recognizable shape. A new decree was passed. The houses along the Straton would be rebuilt with a mandatory, uniform style, the Baroque style we see today. They were designed with ground floor shops, a first-floor residence, and a mandatory second floor for stability. Crucially, they adopted uniform height and roof pitch, giving the Straton its perfect, elegant harmony. This uniformity was a statement that the Republic was whole, stable, and ready for business. A few key buildings survived the worst of the cataclysm, standing as physical symbols of resilience. The Sponza Palace, with its sturdy architecture, and the ground floor of the Rector's Palace were spared. But the rest of the city was a testament to Baroque rebirth. The new Cathedral of the Assumption, rebuilt over the ruins of the old one, rose in spectacular Baroque style. The Church of Saint Blaise, a symbol of the city's continuous faith and protection, was rebuilt with ornate Baroque elegance, mirroring the city's defiant spirit. The Republic of Ragusa regained some of its prosperity in the 18th century. With the shift of global trade routes to the Atlantic, major powers like England and France began to ignore the Mediterranean, creating a window of neutrality for Ragusa. By flying a neutral flag, Ragusan merchants once again thrived, carrying goods for all sides during the Napoleonic Wars. This final, profitable chapter, however, was brief. In 1806, Napoleon's French army marched onto the scene. With no realistic military defense against a continental power, the city surrendered to French forces. 2 years later, on January 31, 1808, Marshal Auguste de Marmont formally dissolved the Republic of Ragusa. The flag of Saint Blaise, the symbol of centuries of hard-won freedom, was lowered for the last time. The Pearl of the Adriatic was no longer a republic. It was absorbed into the Napoleonic Illyrian provinces, and after Napoleon's defeat, it fell under the rule of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The long, extraordinary story of the independent Republic of Ragusa was over. The city was now just Dubrovnik, a port in a foreign empire. Its struggle for liberty, however, was not. It would resurface generations later, during a conflict that would once again shatter the city's ancient stone. Part 4. Scars of the Modern Era, the wall that withstood cannons. For a city that had fought for centuries to control its own destiny, the 19th and early 20th centuries were an era of quiet diminishment. Dubrovnik became a handsome but secondary port in the vast Austro-Hungarian Empire. Yet, it was during this period of foreign rule that the seeds of a new destiny were sown: tourism. Writers and poets, captivated by the perfectly preserved medieval and Baroque architecture, rediscovered the city. Lord Byron famously dubbed it the Pearl of the Adriatic. As railroads and steamships made the Dalmatian coast accessible, the city's ancient walls, once a military defense, became an irresistible historical attraction. Dubrovnik found a new way to survive, by sharing its beauty with the world. The collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire after World War I brought Dubrovnik into the new state of Yugoslavia. After the devastation of World War II, the city became a celebrated jewel of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, its historic status cemented by the annual Dubrovnik Summer Festival, which used its ancient forts and squares, Ragusa, the Rector's Palace, as stages for drama and music. In 1979, the old city was justly inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The world officially recognized that this was a place of universal value, a cultural treasure to be protected at all costs. But the old, simmering tensions of the Balkans, which Ragusa had so brilliantly navigated with treaties and tribute, were about to erupt with a ferocity that negated centuries of diplomatic peace. The Siege of 1991, an attack on history. In 1991, as the Yugoslav Federation disintegrated and Croatia declared independence, Dubrovnik's unique, isolated geographical position became a fatal liability. The former military strategy of diplomacy was useless against the forces gathering on its borders. Starting in October 1991, the city and the surrounding area were subjected to a devastating military engagement known as the Siege of Dubrovnik. Units of the Yugoslav People's Army, JNA, primarily from Montenegro and Serbia, surrounded the city, cutting off all land and sea links. For months, the people of Dubrovnik and the refugees who poured into the city were deprived of water, electricity, and food. Survivor, Luka Gergic, interview in the Old Town. We thought the walls would protect us. They had stood for centuries. We thought they wouldn't dare. It was a UNESCO city, demilitarized. We used to tell ourselves, they will fire over us, not at us. But when the shelling started, it was indiscriminate. It was an attack on the stones, yes, but it was an attack on our history, on our identity. The climax of the siege came on December 6, 1991, the day of the heaviest bombardment. Artillery shells slammed into the historic center, turning the narrow streets into traps. The elegant, uniform roofs along the Stratton, rebuilt with such care after the 1667 earthquake, were perforated by hundreds of direct hits. The ancient, defensive stone walls themselves, the proud symbol of the city's resilience, were struck repeatedly. The bombardment of a UNESCO World Heritage Site was a public relations catastrophe for the attackers and sparked immediate international condemnation. News footage of smoke billowing from the Old Town shocked the world. It was a visible, undeniable act of cultural destruction. Historian, Drive, Irina Barisic interview overlooking the Old Town. The shelling of Dubrovnik was not a tactical necessity, it was an ideological act. It was meant to destroy the symbols of Croatian independence, and the oldest symbol they could find was the physical evidence of the Republic of Ragusa. But what they accomplished was the opposite. It crystallized global support for Croatia's cause. The silent scars and the rebirth. When the siege finally ended in mid-1992, the damage was immense. Over two-thirds of the buildings in the Old Town were hit. The iconic Onofrio's large fountain was damaged. The Rector's Palace and the Sponza Palace were scarred. Today, the evidence of this modern conflict is fading, but it is not gone. Look closely at the roofs from above, from the heights of Mount Sur. You will see a patchwork of color. The older, darker terracotta tiles that survived the bombardment, and the newer, brighter, UNESCO-approved tiles imported from Toulouse, France, which replaced those destroyed. The pattern of light and dark is a silent map of the damage. The subsequent restoration program, coordinated by UNESCO, was a monumental effort. It was a commitment to rebuild Dubrovnik not just as a tourist destination, but as a living monument to human endurance. The focus was on authenticity, ensuring the new stones and tiles matched the original construction materials and techniques. Today, the city is physically restored, once again gleaming against the Adriatic. But the spirit of Libertas remains a complicated, vital force. The challenges have changed. Now it faces the pressure of over-tourism, the need to balance preservation with prosperity, and the strange, modern legacy of being a global movie set for fantasies like Game of Thrones. Yet, the essence of Dubrovnik endures. Every evening, as the shadows lengthen, you can walk the Stratton and feel the weight of its history. From the Roman refugees fleeing invasion, to the cunning merchants outwitting empires, to the citizens who survived modern shelling, the same spirit prevails. The stubborn, magnificent will to exist, free and beautiful, on the edge of the sea. Part 5. The enduring legacy, the Pearl reborn. Dubrovnik began as a necessity. A fortress forged by refugees determined to be free. It flourished as a miracle, a republic sustained by intellect and diplomacy. And today, it exists as a paradox, a perfectly preserved ancient city battling the forces of the modern world. The 21st century has seen Dubrovnik achieve a level of global fame the old Ragusan diplomats could never have imagined. Following its meticulous, UNESCO-assisted restoration after the war, the city became a beacon of resilience. Then came the cameras. Narrator. The ancient ramparts and narrow, winding streets that once protected the Republic of Ragusa from Venetian and Ottoman ambition were recast as the capital of a fictional kingdom. For millions around the globe, Dubrovnik is less a historic Croatian city and more a place called King's Landing. This explosion of popular culture tourism, while providing massive economic lifeblood, presents the ultimate challenge to its enduring spirit. Local business owner, Maria Horvat, interview in a quiet alley off the Stratton. We survived the siege, and now we survive the crowds. It is a different kind of war. In 1991, we fought to save the stones. Today, we fight to save the soul that lives between the stones. We need the tourism, yes, but we must never let the city become just a stage set. The sheer scale of visitors, often arriving in massive cruise ship waves, threatens the delicate balance of life within the walls. UNESCO itself has had to monitor the situation, pushing the city to limit the daily flow of visitors and implement the Respect the City program. It is an extraordinary reversal of fortune. The city that once manipulated empires must now manage the flow of its admirers. Yet, the deeper, authentic culture of Dubrovnik persists, often thriving in the shadows of the high-season crowds. The cultural calendar remains firmly rooted in Ragusan tradition. Every year, the city celebrates the feast of its patron saint, Saint Blaise, on February 3rd. This is a day when the spirit of the Republic is powerfully recalled. The city flag, bearing the image of the saint, is flown, and ancient banners are paraded through the streets. It is a reminder that Dubrovnik is not defined by its current challenges, but by its deep, continuous history. And in the summer, the Dubrovnik Summer Festival continues to transform the ancient spaces into vibrant cultural venues. The Fort Lavragenik, the fortress whose walls bear the immortal inscription Libertas, becomes an open-air stage for performances, most famously Shakespeare's Hamlet, performed under the stars, its themes of power and conscience echoing against the very stones of the former republic. Local artist, musician, Nicola Kralj, interview inside the Revelin Fortress used as a music venue. When I play music here, within these walls, it is an acoustic experience unlike any other. You feel the history, you feel the continuity. Our ancestors built these forts to keep people out. We now use them to bring people in, to share the poetry and the sound and the resilience that has always been here. The history is in the acoustics. The modern city of Dubrovnik, extending outside the old town, embraces its identity as a Croatian regional center. But the old town, the heart of the ancient republic, remains the source of its pride. It is a place where you can touch the weight of history simply by placing your hand on the cool, worn stone of the straton. Stand on the Minsta Tower, the massive round fortress that dominates the northern wall, and look out over the city. You see the geometric perfection of the restored roofs, the labyrinth of narrow streets, the purposeful uniformity born of the 1667 catastrophe. From this vantage point, you understand that every wall, every palace, and every law was built to serve one supreme ideal: liberty. The Ragusans knew that freedom was never a permanent gift, but a perpetual project. It was something they had to buy with gold, defend with stone, and sustain with their collective will. Today, Dubrovnik is more than just a pearl of the Adriatic. It is an enduring lesson in human ambition. It is a city that, against overwhelming odds, refused to yield its sovereignty, its culture, or its spirit. It stands as a monument to the stubborn, beautiful idea that even the smallest republic can endure, provided it is founded on the conviction that freedom should not be sold for all the gold in the world.